Hello everyone. What we're going to do in this series of videos is take a much closer look at the IRS. Most people think that they know what it is, they think they know why it is, and people accept it as just one of those evils that we have to have. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking a little closer into what it is, what the IRS is, why it is, where it came from, and how things have morphed over the past 100 years in the history of the IRS. Now, this has nothing to do with being a tax protester. What this is an unlawful tax protester, and I would definitely classify myself as that. So let's delve into this. This will be a short video, maybe a half hour, and what we're going to do is just look at some of the little tidbits to get you thinking about some of this stuff and prep you for the next one that will be some definitely meat and potatoes. Okay, now no one really likes the IRS. I don't know of anybody in my history of 61 years that could state that I really like the IRS. I like paying money to them every year, a third or a quarter of my income or whatever it might be for many people. So if no one in this Republic of 50 United States, and we're united as brothers and sisters essentially, if no one likes the IRS, why does it exist? Especially as is, if we the people are the creators of government and the creators of the IRS. Now, how can 330 million of us be so enslaved as to accept this obvious tyranny over us and do nothing about it? Now, doesn't it seem so wrong to you by now that you are ready to know about the problem and to do something about it? I hope so. So let's get into this IRS scam. It's a beautiful scenario. It's a beautiful setup that they have, that they've deceived us with and made us believe that our taxes are actually doing something in this country other than making somebody very wealthy. Now, what you're going to learn in this series of videos will likely make you angry. It certainly has me over the past 12 years of studying this. You might be frustrated, but realize that this information will empower you to begin your extraction from the jaws of a beast system that's basically deceived us all over 100 years of its life, a little over 100 years. You've heard the stories, now see the evidence. Now, who am I? That's not really an important issue. The issue is, what does the evidence prove, and are you willing to take the steps necessary to escape the fraud you were born into? You were born into it, your parents were born into it, your grandparents were born into it, and their parents most likely. 100 years is a long time for a people to be deceived on a subject that we are grossly ignorant of, and the shame is on us because we should know what the law states, and we've made ourselves willing slaves to this whole system. Now, I will say, though, I've had 12 years of researching the IRS and the laws because I was challenged, and that's a whole nother story, as many other people in this country have been challenged. And once they dig into the courts and dig into the records and dig into the Constitution, it's amazing. Now, I took the IRS into 9 federal courts and into the United States Supreme Court because of issues I had with them. I took them to court. They did not take me to court. I took them to court. Now, what happened? Due process was denied in every one of the courts. In all 10 courts, not only did the IRS ignore the actual evidence, the courts also denied the evidence and would not consider the facts of record or force the IRS to properly respond to the evidence. The IRS gave totally lame responses using frivolous cases in many cases. Now, this essentially denied me and every American in this country due process of law on IRS claimed authority. There was no due process that actually addressed the evidence that I presented in 40 some pages in every one of those courts, and they refused to look at it. They refused to consider their own laws, congressional testimony, and previous Supreme Court and other rulings that have never been overturned. That was my evidence, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Now, what is the IRS? Well, it was basically instituted in 1913. The same year, not coincidentally, the 16th Amendment was allegedly ratified, which it was not, lawfully, legally ratified, and the same year that the private banking cartel we know as the Federal Reserve came into existence, which the IRS is the collection arm for. And that's a whole another story we may get into as well. May hear some thunder there. We've got a storm moving in. Now, the IRS is a smokescreen giving the illusion to all of us that the government is actually using your taxes to fund itself. It is not. Why the IRS? Now, imagine you wanted to spend as much money as you wanted and grow as large as you wanted. How would you do it? How would you get the money? How would you accomplish such a feat? You'd want a ruse of some kind that appears to provide you the means for spending, but doesn't come close to providing the funds needed for your extravagance, but also keeps the masses ignorant of your scam. And we're talking at a government level. If you're a government, how would you be able to spend as much money as you possibly wanted and hide it from the people? Well, that's what they've done. Where does all the money come from that the government spends? The Federal Reserve, which is, as I mentioned, a private banking cartel of private banks and private rich families who have been basically stealing our money hand over fist. They needed to provide an agency by which the people were deceived into believing their income tax money was actually funding the government. In reality, the IRS is totally unnecessary and is simply the means for the Federal Reserve to steal money under the color of law. Now, the scam. The government knew it had to distance its spending from actual taxes, real assets, or there would be no hope of growing to the cancerous beast it is today. Now, the IRS collects taxes under false pretenses, and Americans believe they are paying their fair share, and that's the psychological tyranny that they have as the mantra around the country. Everyone has to pay their fair share. No, basically you are being bilked by the government under illegal and unconstitutional parameters. Some people say, but without my paying taxes, the government couldn't function. Well, I'm going to give you a quote here. It's from the Grace Commission, which Ronald Reagan commissioned because he was really irritated and saying, where is all this government money going? Where's all the taxes going into the government? What's happening? Where is it going? And this was the quote, and this was the gist of the report. 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt and by federal government contributions to transfer payments. In other words, all individual income tax revenues are gone before one nickel is spent on the services which taxpayers expect from their government. Did you hear that on the nightly news at any time? Nope. So where does the government get the money? Where did the trillions come from to pay for the wars in the Middle East? The ongoing wars, I might add. Where did the money come from to bail out the trillions for the banksters? Where did the trillions come from for the military and other expenses the government has in maintaining its existence? Where did all that money come from? They create it out of thin air. Then they use you, your assets, your children, all of our properties, our lands, our total worth as a republic, as a group of people, as collateral on this false debt to a corrupt, greedy, private banking cartel, all under fraud. Again, as I mentioned, the Federal Reserve is a private banking cartel. That's why they separated us from the gold standard, because if they pinned their money, or money just period, on a tangible asset that is limited, then that limits the spending that the government can do. But if you unpin it and you put it to just paper that they could print, or just digits that they can create out of thin air and put into somebody's bank account, then you've got unlimited spending potential. But they had to keep that from the people. They've spent this money, all that money we just talked about, all right, but it was not funded by your income taxes. Now, is that not a genius system or what? So let's look a little deeper and let's ask some questions. Have you ever proven you owe taxes on income? Just ask yourself that. Have you honestly, truthfully ever proven that you owe income taxes? The history of the IRS is so convoluted and distorted, and it's a fraudulent one. Most so-called authorities are simply perpetuating the IRS scam that claims that all people who work are receiving income and that they are taxpayers. Now, in this introduction to revealing this scam by government and politicians, we will look at some basic evidence that will at least bring questions to your mind and hopefully encourage you to prove whether, number one, you are a taxpayer. You've got to prove whether you're a taxpayer or you're not. You actually receive income, and that you're going to be shocked about when you find out what income is. Whether you actually owe an income tax, or you are actually lawfully liable for income taxes, or you are lawfully required to file a 1040 form. Have you ever proven any of those things? Have you ever looked at it? We've all presumed it our whole lives. Death and taxes, man, they're absolute. Everyone knows that you owe income taxes, correct? Well, let's look at one question here, one of the first ones. Are you a taxpayer? Now, we hear that mantra from media daily regarding how taxpayers are footing government spending and for this and that and whatever. And this has for nearly 100 years meant to cover all Americans. It's like death and taxes, as I mentioned. You can't escape them, and everyone knows that everyone is required to pay their fair share. However, what if the truth is that you may not be lawfully a taxpayer? Let's look at one simple United States Supreme Court quote. It says, the revenue laws are a code or system and regulation of tax assessment and collection. We all know that. They relate to taxpayers and not to non-taxpayers. The latter are without their scope. No procedure is prescribed for non-taxpayers, and no attempt is made to annul any of their rights and remedies in due course of law. Without them, or with them, Congress does not assume to deal, and they are neither of the subject nor of the object of the revenue laws. Have you ever read that? Did you read that in grade school or high school? Has a tax professional or the IRS ever mentioned that you should first check to see if you are a taxpayer? Okay, there's two questions right there, taxpayer and non-taxpayer, right in a court case. Which one are you? What makes you a taxpayer as compared to a non-taxpayer? Here's another United States Supreme Court. Persons who are not taxpayers are not within the system and cannot benefit by following the procedures prescribed for taxpayers. So would you say if you're a taxpayer, then you lawfully owe taxes? Okay, that's clear. If you're a non-taxpayer, why are you volunteering to pay into a system that doesn't demand that you do that? That's what you have to understand. That's what we have to get away from. What law makes you a taxpayer? Let's look at this. This is the IR code itself. I'll skip the top part of it, but general rule. It says, when required by regulations prescribed by the Secretary, any person made liable for any tax imposed by this title, drop down, shall make a return or statement. Every person required to make a return or statement shall include blah blah blah. Okay, so it's simply stating any person made liable, and that's what they point to often. Is this is where it's talking about everyone has to file a tax return and blah blah blah. Okay, any person made liable for any tax imposed by this title. Okay, so the obvious question to ask is, what makes you personally liable for any tax imposed in the IR code book? Again, every person required to make a return or statement. Well, all that's saying is that somebody who is required, or somebody who is a taxpayer, is required to make a return or statement. Real simple, but they twist that around. So any person made liable for any tax is required to make a return. So fine. Let's go back to the question above. Is this you? Now, if you go to the code, you can look it up yourself on the 3 simple topics of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. The IR code is very clear about those liable for paying taxes for producing alcohol, tobacco, or firearms. The liability is clearly associated with those activities, and this makes liable those so involved, and they are required by law to make a return. That is a lawful, legal, constitutional tax, an indirect tax assessment. However, where is it within the IR code that makes you personally, as a private person, liable for the so-called income tax and to make a return? Where is that? Have you ever seen it? Have you ever read it? Have you ever looked it up? Has your tax preparer ever showed you that code? Have they ever pointed to it and said, this is what makes you personally liable to file that 1040 form and to pay income taxes? Ask your CPA, ask your attorney, call your local IRS agent, or send them a letter. We'll get into some of those things. You can start the extraction process by simply doing a Freedom of Information Act letter and just simply start asking questions. Where in the code am I made liable for filing a 1040 income tax return? Now, why do you think they call it voluntary all the time, if it's in fact mandatory? You can't have mandatory and voluntary meaning the same thing. They're always saying it's a voluntary system. Well, it sure is. Most people are voluntarily self-assessing, and when you sign that form, you are signing under the penalty of perjury that you are a taxpayer. Now, you're free to self-assess yourself, that's just the way it is, and hand the government money you don't actually owe. But you do not have to do that. And they're certainly not going to say, hey, you don't owe this tax. They look at it as a gift because there are certain parameters in the laws in there that state that anybody that wants to gift the government money, they can do it, and the government isn't going to say, nope, we don't want it. Now take a look at this. There is a $300,000 income tax proof reward being offered by freedomlawschool.org. You can go to that website and read it for yourself. It states right in there. Freedom Law School is offering $100,000 to the first person who can demonstrate any of the 3 propositions listed below. The winner can collect up to $300,000 if he or she can prove all of the propositions below. Number 1, show what statute written by the Congress of the United States that requires Americans to file an income tax confession or return and pay an income tax. Number 2, show how Americans can file an income tax confession or return without giving up their Fifth Amendment right to not give any information to the government that may be used to prosecute them. And the government uses those forms every day to prosecute Americans. You gave that to them voluntarily. Number 3, prove that the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which, according to the IRS and modern American courts, permitted the income tax to exist, was lawfully added to the United States Constitution. I'm going to give you a hint. It wasn't. There is no law that makes you personally liable. The IR code does not contain any law making anyone liable for an income tax. In addition, how can the IRS be acting as a government agency, which we all, of course, know is true, when the IRS claims it is not a government agency? Let's look at another court case. Diversified Metals. States right in there, number 4. You can look it up, Google it, find it in any law library. The IRS denies that the Internal Revenue Service is an agency of the United States government. What? Really? Have you heard that at any time? Okay, let's look a little bit deeper. What is the IRS? You can go onto the United States Treasury website. Just Google it and go there and type in Treasury Order 150-06, or just TO 150-06, or just 150-06, and it'll bring it up, and it'll show you right here designation as internal revenue. And what's it say there? Service cancellation date. Cancellation date, August 22nd, 2005. The entity formerly known as the Bureau of Internal Revenue would be known as the Internal Revenue Service. This was in 1953 when it was known. It was changed to the Internal Revenue Service. TL 150-06 is what? Canceled. Okay, so that means, what is it now? They're still using the terminology Internal Revenue Service on all their documents. So, but if they've been canceled as Internal Revenue Service, what in the world is going on? Look at another one, Treasury Order 150-02, subject, organization and functions of the Internal Revenue Service. What's it say? Cancellation date, May 2nd, 2006. What's it say? Talks about organization and functions of the Internal Revenue Service were what? Canceled. What is going on? This is all hidden in plain sight. Now I've got to put in the proverbial disclaimer. The IRS and government has made understanding the law seem a very complicated thing, and it can be if we do not put the pieces together and begin to see the simple picture kept from our eyes and minds since childhood. Their code is meant to confuse and obfuscate the truth, but it is knowable. You simply have to decide whether you want to extract yourself from their fraud or keep on paying taxes you do not constitutionally owe. Now, anything in this and future videos is lawful information from the public domain and other sources that we are expected to understand and follow, and I merely pass this on. Please do the same and prove for yourself the truth and find a power you have forgotten you have. Now, knowing the law, we are all required to know every one of their 60 million statutory laws. That is what they expect of us, and we're supposed to know them. Otherwise, we are acting lawlessly. We have to understand that. There's something that we just have to do with our own brains and re-educate ourselves. Okay, so future videos, what can you expect to learn? And this is where we're going to be getting into some of the really interesting elements of what the IRS. The next one, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss what is income. And I'm going to tell you a hint right now. It is not your wages or your salary or compensation for service. We're going to get into the IRS assessment fraud. We're going to get into government jurisdiction, when the government is not over most people or states. You have to understand that. We're going to get into government and what a federal citizen is and a state sovereign or state citizen is. There's a difference, and there's court cases to show this very thing. You've heard of the sovereignty movement or sovereign citizens and stuff, and it's being castigated by the establishment and by the courts and what have you, but the courts themselves have made it very clear that the citizens, the people of the states, are the sovereign. Got the court cases to prove it. We'll get into an IRS writing paper trail for insurance. You start a paper trail, you start to show good faith, you ask them, show me the law, show me these things. Why is there conflicting information out there? You're saying one thing and the Supreme Court saying another, at least originally. Supreme Court's been corrupted too. As I mentioned, I was in there, wasn't actually in the court, but I filed a petition and they wouldn't hear it. And the IRS even filed a motion to they waived their right to respond. And that is the default in any court in the world, except the Supreme Court. The withholding fraud, everyone's caught up with that. They think, well, you have to have taxes withheld. No, you don't. 16th Amendment, that was never lawfully ratified. I've got two big books that prove that. A guy went to every state in the Union and looked into the government archives and what have you and found evidence that the 16th Amendment was never lawfully ratified. And that's allegedly the amendment that they're using to have created this new tax that we're now calling income tax and taxing every one of us. Well, even if it was properly ratified, the 16th Amendment did not do that, and we'll get into details on the 16th Amendment itself. The Federal Reserve fraud, that's a biggie, and the complicity in the IRS scam and how to save your money and property from illegal confiscation or theft. There's simple steps you can do, but you just have to understand the basics. And I will mention that when you start to do some of these things, you want to be prepared to defend yourself, and certainly you want to protect your assets and anything that you might have with trusts and all the things that the rich always do. You don't have to be rich to get a trust. They're very simple. You can do it in an hour and go to the bank and create a trust and get it out of your name. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's the way it goes. And we'll get into more on the taxation side, but just remember that when you start to rattle the cage, they may want to test you. They didn't come after me and take me to court because they couldn't. They wouldn't dare because they wouldn't want it in front of a jury. And I created a paper trail big enough to show that I was not willfully failing to file. I believe that I do not have to file, and I've got the evidence to prove it. But they can still go after you like in a civil, or go after you with a levy or lien, and they're doing that illegally too, and we'll get into that. That's a whole nother topic that we can discuss. Now here's some resources you can look at. I'd highly recommend them because you want to read, because the more you see this stuff, the more the pieces fit together and you get the bigger picture, and the duh moment comes, and you suddenly realize, man, we've been deceived, and this is simpler than it's made out to be. A good book is Constitutional Income, Do You Have Any by Phil Hart, one of the best ones I know of. Cracking the Code, Pete Hendrickson. Some things I don't agree with his approach. He's still playing the IRS game. I think that we just need to get out of it totally, otherwise we can get into trouble. But he's having success, and I don't want to knock that at all, but we disagree on the income side of things and what it is. Jeff Dickstein has a book called Judicial Tyranny. That's a very good one. The Biggest Tax Loophole of All by Otto Skinner. You can pause this thing and write all those names down. The Federal Mafia by Irwin Schiff. Irwin actually was taken to court and put in prison because he was one of the pioneers on this thing. A lot of this stuff has been perfected to where that sort of thing does not have to happen, and I'm hoping here in the near future, when the IRS is in the spotlight on these very topics, which I think is about ready to happen, he'll be released from prison just like everybody else that's ever had anything to do with the IRS. Another one is the FamilyGuardian.org website, FamGuardian. That URL there is what you want, but it's a huge site. It's not in the United States, so they can't shut it down, but it is the most well documented facts against the IRS and against the taxation and the whole scam from A to Z. But it is very heavy stuff, and it's very detailed. I would recommend the other stuff to get you into it, but that's certainly a good resource that you can do research into, say looking up a particular case or a particular topic that you might be dealing with. The other websites are thematrixhasyou.org, and you can go to that one, the No Tax HTML site. Quite a bit of documentation there, and then foundationfortruthandlaw.org, and then the /files, and then the IRS directory, and quite a few documents in there too. So if we make this go viral, it could transform our republic overnight. If more people understand this stuff and start to just look at it simply and realize, hey, we've got to take our liberties back, we've got to take our freedoms back, we've got to get off our duffs and turn off the TV and start to spend some time on these things, get together with like-minded people, take it to your local groups, start meetings. We're having constitutional classes in our county here in Pagosa Springs, Archuleta County, Colorado. We just need to get this out there, so please like the series, send it to other people, put it up on Facebook, let's get it going. Let the people know what these facts are, and let everyone decide for themselves what does the evidence say. And you know, we're grown up. We can make these decisions, and we are the boss. The federal government is not the boss. They are the servant, but they have usurped authority over us, and we have to do something to get it back. So let's let the people speak, okay? Looking forward to the next time. Hopefully I can get it up here and maybe in the next week or so, but I guarantee you I'll get it up, okay? Take care.